Hello, everyone. So welcome to our Enable Talk 13, which is the third week of our summer school 2022. And welcome to Jockey Club Objects Talk Empathic Ecologies Education Project. And here we got over 100 design students from design school in Hong Kong. And today's conversation, we have three very special guests from Europe. Most of them, actually, all of them are teaching at Zurich University of Art and Design. So but I think this is really interesting because actually they are the core members of this group under the Shared Campus program about critical ecology. So first of all, Nuria, we're going to talk about how this group is coming up, and she's going to provide some really interesting, exciting example. And then Joëlle is going to share some of her teaching in Zurich and how this concept of critical ecology has been into different projects. And then finally, we got Andreas. We're going to share some of his project with the student in art and design, looking at the critical ecologies that we've been talking for how many years, Nuria? 4 years? Nuria?
Sorry, 6 years, I believe.
6 years, okay.
Yes,
all right, so
yes.
Okay, so I think we should start, and then I pass it to Nuria. Do you want to share the screen? I'll stop sharing.
Yes, thank you. So okay, so thanks a lot. As Yanki mentioned, I'm Nuria Krämer. I'm working at the Zurich University of the Arts, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. I've been seeing already a little bit some impressions of the workshop. I'm very fascinated. I will be first saying a few words of Shared Campus and the Critical Ecologies group, just to give you a bigger picture of the context, how we come to be here today with you. And then I will give you some examples of some artworks and some questions and thoughts to share with you. So first of all, Shared Campus is a cooperation platform from different higher arts institutions. And the whole idea is that we come together to co-develop a broad scope of activities as summer schools, semester programs, workshops. And in this framework also Yanki developed with Enable Foundation altogether this fantastic summer school that you're running. But this Critical Ecologies group is part of the Shared Campus as only one theme group out of 5. Here you will see we have thematic areas in Shared Campus, and Critical Ecologies, as you see, is one of them. And the institutions that collaborate are from Hong Kong, London, Melbourne, Paris, Singapore, Taipei. And the question is, why do we do that? So we think that there are lots of urgent issues that we can tackle from different perspectives, out of different experiences, different cultural backgrounds. And so that's how we see the need to work together and join our knowledges and experiences and see sharing as the core part of it. So Critical Ecologies, which is this group, as Yanki mentioned, that we are already working together since about 5 years at least. And when we came together, we thought, well, what is our motivation? And we all see that there is a clear ecological emergency that we want to be active in. We want to be part of being active and changing something. And we come from different places, as mentioned, from Europe, from Hong Kong, from Tokyo. And we want to combine our multiple voices to promote cultural exchange and strengthen the bonds of art, sustainability, and agency. So I will be today talking about how we can get in action with and for the non-human other, being living beings and non-living beings. My examples will be mostly about living beings, as you will see. But to start with, we will think about art, action, and ecology. So when we started, or actually before we started, we were talking about this ecological crisis that we are all experiencing here in Europe, where I'm at the moment. It's extremely hot. In the south of Europe, forests are burning, while in other parts of the world there are floodings happening. So the temperatures are changing. We have global warming. In Hong Kong, I was always astonished when there was a typhoon, what kinds of plastics and waste was coming out of the sea. So we see very clearly an emergency, and we think that art has the ability to get into action and make a change. And we started from the idea that we have a crisis of sensibility. So to really sense and understand things and to connect to them. And that's where we think that art can do something. And so our question was, what can art do and how? We got into a huge need of rethinking the human, which you have been doing already in the last 2 weeks. And that mainly is the question of how did we get into such a crazy situation with the environment? And that is maybe we need to shift away from the human-centric perspective and get to understand our relations with the environment, with the living and non-living beings. And so that means that we have to change how we imagine togetherness, how we imagine how we live and coexist with others, how we relate to each other, how we communicate, and how we build kinship. And so here we go into making with. With is the question of how we can relate. Here we have been discussing a lot about in the last years about Donna Haraway, Timothy Morton, and other writers that have been conceiving the making with as a possibility to relate, to cooperate, and to feel empathy. And here you have been working also in the last weeks very strongly on the sense of getting as close as possible to the living and non-living other beings, and to create this kind of empathy and different kinds of relationships. And then we go into the next step, the speculative action, which is once we have sensed and observed and related to the non-human other, we can speculate about other possible relationships besides the one that we already know. And this is all that we will be looking into. And here come some examples. So for the examples that I will be showing, I will start introducing with some basic questions that stand at the beginning and some practical questions that maybe you can take along during the presentation and check with you what is happening in these examples. You will see different artworks or different design practices. And the question is, who is cooperating? So who are the companions? What can you observe of the action? So what are the strategies applied? For whom is this action or this work done? And what are the possible changes or shifts in our relationships and the way we understand ourselves on this planet? Please feel free to include at any time questions in the chat that we can look at afterwards. So I will start with the questions. So as mentioned here, the accompanying questions that underlie all these examples that I will be showing is, how can we search for alternative modes of living and thinking in response to this ecological crisis? How do we think about our relations to the non-human other? How do we reimagine and foster new possible entanglements with the non-human other? And how do our actions influence the way we see ourselves as one species inhabiting a planet in crisis? The practical questions, as briefly mentioned already before, is who are the companions? So these ones, I would be really happy if you can keep them in mind while I show the examples. Who are the companions? Who is cooperating? What kind of relationships to the non-human other are created? What is your observation about the action, the very personal one that you have? What caught your attention? For whom is the action done or the work? And how does this work or action influence the way we see ourselves as one species inhabiting the planet? So here I will start with one work, Capsule, by Nathalie Crasset, which is a design project about a pigeon house. So in France, you have since a very long time a tradition of keeping pigeons. And here the question was, there were two issues in debate. One was that this tradition of having the trained pigeons is disappearing. And on the other hand, the people that work with the pigeons, they have a very close relationship. They know a lot about the pigeons. They know how to take care of them, how to interact with them. And the question here was, how can this knowledge and this practice be kept and be mediated? So this project designed this capsule, as you will see. This is a space which started from the idea to create a tree, which then on top, similar as a fungus, has like a double-sided cover that is put on top of it with different holes at the sides where pigeons can enter. They can also sit outside or go inside. Here on the right hand, you see the inside where pigeons sitting on this kind of triangle. So there's inside of this different sitting areas for them. And on the other hand, here on the picture on the lower in the middle, you can see the part where there's information for the visitors. So basically, this capsule has two areas, one that is exclusively for the pigeons and one that is for the people that enter this pigeon house and can see the pigeons, can observe them, but can also receive some information. So here the question is, who are the companions, or who is collaborating? We have here, for the creation of this work, we have the people that are training the pigeons and that are working with them together with the artists, the pigeons and the artists. And then we have the audience that is learning about these practices and has the chance to observe pigeons and to be very close to them. Then I will go to another project about pigeons, which is the Pigeon Block. Here we have a different form of collaboration. We have basically, this is a group of people that was very concerned with air quality. And so they thought, okay, how can we work together in a city with pigeons to measure air quality? Pigeons are flying all over the city. They are extremely good navigators. And here we have this pigeons that come back. So it's similar as the, I don't know how they call it in English, like they carry the message pigeons. And they have small devices attached to them to measure the air quality. And this way, animals and people are collaborating to measure air quality all over the city from the perspective of the bird, but at the same time also benefiting the humans, in the sense that we gather data and that is important to then take measures that change the air quality inside of the city. So this kind of data affects the policies of the city. And it's done in collaboration, as mentioned, between humans and pigeons. So here the collaborators are the designers, the pigeons, and then there is also the scientists in the back gathering the data. And all together, what they want to change is to ensure that we have an air quality that is good for humans as well as for animals and other beings. Then we have a very different project, which is by a Swiss artist, Maurice Maggi. It's called the flower graffiti, Blumen graffiti. And he was thinking about how he could change the urban space by making graffiti with flowers. He basically did these graffitis with seed bombing in different areas throughout the city. And this seed bombing created colorful landscapes that at the same time became a home for different bees and other insects. So on one hand, the landscape, the city urban landscape became more beautiful, but also offered space for other beings to stay there and to survive, basically, in between all the cement and the constructed areas. He became quite well known in town, and you will see all over Zurich that this graffiti or seed bombing took totally over. Then we have another project again, also with plants. It's a tree lab by Markus Meder, an artist working between art and science, also at the Zurich University. And they planted some small sensors at the trunks of the tree to measure how trees breathe. And with global warming, they have to open the pores more to take more air in and to release also heat. So it's a whole need to adapt to the climate. And these sensors that measured how trees are breathing could also see the changes that happened over time. And they use this data to make something audible that normally escapes our sensory perception. So here the collaborators are the trees and the artists, as well as scientists. But at the same time, the result that they have is that we become aware of something that it escapes our perception normally. So it creates awareness. So then we have a project by Zheng Bo, who is from the School of Creative Media in Hong Kong. It's called Kindred. And he thought about a different form of coexistence with plants. Basically, he thought about all kinds of weeds that we normally reject. We used to have very plant landscapes, as you know, from Hong Kong. Most of the areas is very clear which kind of plants are allowed, which none. And here he used a museum space, in this case in Shanghai, to offer space for seeds. So opening up space that normally is used for exhibitions to have seeds growing there and staying also there on the long term. This is the outside area, the picture that you see of a museum. And so the whole installation offers on one hand space to plants, but it's also a spatial installation with the lights. So we humans become aware of their presence. Yeah, it's attracts. So here it's the combination of the artist with plants and the museum. And the strategies applied is to create a space that attracts our attention, to become aware about the seeds and the wild plants having their own space in a museum in that case. Then I will show you only one more example. I have tons and tons of other examples, and I was just running through, but I think that's an interesting one that relates a lot to what you have been doing about immersing into different beings. So here we have a goat man. Thomas Thwaites is an English artist. Actually, he's an English artist, designer, and writer. And he was very concerned about how to become the other, in that case, a goat, And he has been building physical devices to move like a goat. He has been testing how to eat and digest like a goat. He did all possible changes onto his body to become a goat, and then stayed for some days in the Swiss Alps with a group of goats and started to move with them to become part of their group, and did all the observations about how it is to take some holidays from being a human and become a goat, and and see how exactly experience in first person the realities of goats. So here he has also been working with scientists into understanding the bodies and how goats are actually also biologically and physically built. But on the other hand, also the social structures that goats have with them made him understand from a first person much better their realities. And so this work was shown in forms of videos and documentation, and there's also a book about it. And what it did is to try and make us aware about different existences and different realities. So I will be stopping here. I did a fast forward of examples, but all of them go through the questions about the action of what can art do, who is collaborating with whom, what are the relationships that we build, which are the ones that we imagine, and what are the things we want to change or the effects we want to have with the designs or with the works that we do. All of them have different effects. All of them have different strategies, from designing through bombing with seeds, through changing your body in order to have a different mode of perception, to collaborate with pigeons in order to gather data, or with trees in order to create awareness about something we do not see. So these are all different strategies, and all of them have different aims. And you have been experimenting a lot in the last week, and I hope that these examples give you different directions about different needs and different possibilities of what we can do. So thanks a lot. And please, if there are questions, do not hesitate to share them in the chat or to mention them afterwards.
Great. Thank you, Nuria. She always did amazing example going through, because she's been traveling around the world, meeting many people. So I think the situation or the practice is, if you have any question unclear about the presentation or any cases Nuria were talking about, it's time to ask the question. But if you want to have a discussion, please wait until the end, because there will be, after the free presentation, we will have more ideas on discussion, how we can actually bring it to this conversation. But I think just anyone have any burning question, something not clear about the presentation, or particular case you want to know a bit more, so do raise your hand and just ask a very direct questions or something you want to clarify. Anyone? Our trainer, but it's okay if, because I know Nuria did it very quickly, but my feeling is very clear. And so, but if anyone have any clarification questions, please raise your hand or ask in the, okay, group E, there's something. Well, is it useful for video editing? Okay, so Nuria, we have some interns, which is some very technical background, and they are from TV and editing or filming. So I think he or she is always come back with some technical question. But see how you feel about this question.
Yeah, I actually have an answer. Maybe, I don't know, it depends. I didn't show an example about a filmmaker who did films for apes. So there is a project that was working very closely also with scientists, but the ones that do experiment with apes. And this artist just stayed there and observed how the scientists work with the apes and noticed that the apes actually really liked watching TV. As you can imagine, this was noticed in the United States of America, where apes seem to be able to watch TV at these places. And but the interesting part was that means that apes, similar as humans, are really interested in watching narratives and watching stories, and also in presenting themselves. So if you go to the zoo, you can see how maybe the male alpha ape comes out and starts to scream, and everyone, the other apes, look and admire or just don't care. And so there is an act of performance. And due to this, to finding out that there might be this interest, this person started doing movies from people embodying apes. And so you had people being apes and performing apes being filmed. And then this film was showed to the real apes, and you could see how they react and how they were interested and how they were concerned, or if they liked it or not, or if they really caught specific scenes really caught their attention. And so it was about narratives and sharing narratives. And here it was really interesting to see, for whom are you doing the film? What is, I mean, you acknowledge that apes are also telling stories to each other. You share stories, and you obviously do the editing also to see how that works for apes. So you can actually apply really technical skills into, or experiment with technical skills in order to find out how you can communicate with the other. This is a very direct example, but obviously also from examples that we have been seeing, as for example the tree lab, you use very technical skills, as with sensors capture sound and then translate them into a piece. The effects that you have, they vary according to the project. So one is to create awareness, and the other one is to directly prove that we share narratives. I hope that helped.
Yeah, I think that the question is, what is the purpose of your skill? So how can you actually using your skill, if you are a very good video editor, how can your skill is so skillful that you can actually apply to a lot of purpose? I think that may be something, actually a question project back to the student, because I know that you are learning video editing, you become very professional in video editing. So our question for you is, what your skill, which has become so skillful in the coming 2 years time, 3 years time, you become a professional video editor, how you use your skill to actually asking different questions, looking at different purpose. So I know that you are very keen on knowing why I'm learning video editing, but I hope that instead of give you a direct answer, we actually give you more questions. So see how you feel about this. And also seeing other more experienced designers, video makers, how they actually use this, become something, a skill for asking questions for our future. So I hope this, as I say, we're not giving you the direct answer, but actually giving more thoughts or something to really think about. Yeah? Okay. So, okay, thank you, Nuria, again. So maybe you can go back to have a coffee and we will, no coffee?
I'm here with you.
Okay, no, you're here with me, but you can also have a coffee and then relax a bit, sit back, and then we're going to have Joëlle to share her experience and see how some of the questions are skill-based and also critical thinking, how these things can merge together. So I think we'll give the screen to Joëlle. You give her the right to share. Yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna share my screen. Hopefully everything will be seen. Can you see it full screen? Yeah, good, thank you. First of all, I really want to thank the team Enable at Enable Foundation for this opportunity to speak in front of you. That's a great pleasure, and I wish I could be on location right now and be with you, but I'm talking to you all from Zurich, Switzerland. So I called my my presentations, it's kind of a mix or a remix of a few things that I've been working on the last few years, also within the critical ecology questions. Just a quick intro so you know where I'm coming from with my practice. I really like mixing familiarity and strangeness together. And I always like this kind of ambivalence between the ordinary and the extraordinary in a way. I followed a lot of different, worked in a lot of different labs and places, studied also in some of those places, but basically the common thread between all of those places where I worked and did research was that they were always trying to also interrogate our relationship with technologies and emerging methodologies to deal with this increasing capacities we have to create and innovate. If you want to know more, I'll put out, this is my homepage website, I'll put out some information. I just also want to, what I'm going to do in this short presentation, because there's a lot of content, so I'm going to try to be very synthetic, is kind of looking at notions of how the thematic of ecologies and the emergency that this brought forth is constantly also provoking us to think differently, a little bit like the discussion we just had about why is it concerning my practice as a video editor, but how actually all of us in our fields should be triggering questions. And so I'll talk about some of these notions also that for me are very politically motivated. Then I'll show a few examples of works I did with my students in 2 classes of hacking values, and one is called Embodied Interaction. So I think what we have to really think of, and those are kind of proposals I give to you all, is sort of trying to think of moments of responsibilities of our roles and how we embody those roles. We all have, because we are designers and artists and researchers, makers, teachers, we all have extreme power in all sorts of ways. We have a lot of influence on others. And as you may know from the Spider-Man movies and comics, with a lot of power comes great responsibility. So it's a little bit about that. What is our responsibilities? Especially we work a lot, and I hope that you are doing this in your daily life. We work a lot with users. We work a lot with participants. We do a lot of studies or user studies. So that means that anything that we produce as artifacts or system, they can really affect how people live, communicate, and act. So it's important, I think, that's the base zero of all this, is that we all operate with different values. I don't know how many hundred, I see 136 people here participating in that Zoom today. We are 136 people with very different values. Sometimes we have to work in teams and collaborate, and we realize sometimes that something is not working or something is working really well. And most of the time, when it's working or not working, you can really come down to the fact of, do we share those values? But I would say that until you ask the question, what are your operative values? You may not even know what they are. You may not know to realize this sort of silent, tacit maybe unconscious operation that motivates you and guides you in life. You may have individual values or collective one. You may be an abundance of contradictions. I know I am. The good thing is that we also realize that whether we learned our values from our culture or our families or our friends or our school, we can also change those values over time. We can change our minds because our brain is so plastic, and we can hack our own social and human values as well. One example I really like to share is this notion of, for instance, what is beauty? It's a very weird term. Beauty has, for instance, a lot of idea of standardizations, and especially from country to country, this might differ. But lately, for the last maybe 50, 60 years, there's this kind of standardization of beauty expectations, especially for the human body. But if you look at the history of the human body, beauty itself has been so fluctuating. And so one of the things you can start with as an exercise is to redefine beauty for you. This is an example of a carrot that grew in my garden. It's a carrot that you might not find in the supermarkets, but for me, it's the epitome of beautiful. And it goes back a little bit to this notion of making kin with nature and appreciating this as a also intelligent life form. I know it's a bit provocative to say that, but there is so much intelligence in every corner of this carrot. And going back to carrot, another page, it's kind of a coincidence, but this is the cover of a book that I really like and I really recommend. It's called The Practice of Everyday Life by Michel de Certeau. And he was really approaching the idea of everyday life, from carrots to cooking, to walking, to poetry, as also a form of resistance, as also a form of being there in the world. No matter the circumstances that surround you, there's always ways to resist and put your own mark as an artist. And so that goes back a little bit to this notion of responsibilities. In the more like, or let's say the sort of caricature or stereotypes, and I speak here specifically about design, and especially design of technologies and services, we look at it as more or less useful, or it's your next gadget that may or may produce revenues and money. But we think of that too often outside the scope of entanglements with questions of colonial legacies and continued form of exploitation. Who is going to produce the work? Who is going to work in factories to create the design that you are making right now? How are they there? Are they fairly paid? Are they outsourced in different countries that already have a lot of colonial legacies embedded in them? What are the policies, the trade, the labor, the gender resources, the life cycle that are embedded in that, and the power structures involved in anything, in any object, in any artifacts that we produce? We now have, as designers, the responsibilities to think of that in a universe, in a galaxy of all these entanglements. There is no way around it. It's too urgent now to not think about these aspects. So I'm just giving an example here of Palantir. You may or may not have heard of this company. It's one of the most pernicious sort of underwater company there is. It's based in the US, and they are gathering so much data that they are able to provide sort of surveillance data for a wide range of companies that are, and especially, for instance, in the case of the US, they are able to track immigrants that can be tracked and be told to go, or I forgot the word, exposed from the country. Another problem that we often have with design and technologies is that we think that anything can be solved, any problem can be solved by design and by tech. This is a meme, a famous sort of fun meme where, it's kind of making a joke at the Silicon Valley, because it's like, oh, there's a problem. Let's make it one that can be solved by technology and by a surveillance hellscape. That's how the Silicon Valley thinks. And you can see that all the time. There is this notion that technology is going to save us from ourselves, from our society, but oftentimes it adds more problem. So I really advocate for de-evangelizing technology and design in that structure, and to really think from the ground up, what do we actually need and what do we put out in the world. So again, an example of how entanglement things are, it's really important to remember, for instance, that the push in the market in the 16th, 17th century for more comfortable clothes, which was justifiably important. People needed to have clothes that were better than linen to work and live. And so cotton was pushed in such a high demand because it was such a comfortable material that it propelled the slavery trade. And is now also creating so many issues as well in many different countries. So there is something really interesting to always relate something as beautiful and something as convenient as fashion with something as dark as slavery. Right now, we have also situations where within that notion of critical ecologies, we're also becoming more and more aware of how there is a differentiation or a gap between we have access to what are our responsibilities and what companies are actually doing at the same time. So here is Nestle, Pepsi, Coke harvesting water, while local people in the countries where the water is harvested don't have access to clean water. It's important to remember that we often talk about responsibilities of individuals related to ecologies, but at the end of the day, it's mostly companies that are, and especially fossil fuel companies, that are responsible here in this case for 71% of global emissions. Again, a little bit sort of a throw at Elon Musk and his notion of ecologies. Is a little bit, of course, electric cars are important compared to fuel emitting cars. But what is also one of the best is public transport and buses. So it's nice to also really rethink the infrastructure that is already existing and that we can revamp it. About living with co-species, this is a project I did. This is a project that is called Tweepology. It was basically a work where I generated Twitter, a landscape from Twitter data. So this was a kind of a garden made out, every little details that you see in this garden made out of styrofoam is actually a detail that was triggered by a Twitter message. And this piece remained in storage for a few years, and recently we went back to retrieve it, and we realized that mice make a nest out of it. So this is the mice traces in that storage place. It was really interesting because I thought, oh, I could throw it away and forget about this piece. But then I decided to really think of it as also my work of art as coexisting with mice in a way. Another example I really like to give is in this notion of coexistence and giving back to nature its importance. This is a project that has been done by a botanist in Nantes, and you see, and you probably have in your own streets, a lot of weeds growing, A lot of unknown plants that we walk on, we don't know what they are. And just the fact of giving them names, like a person, an artist took the effort to identify those flowers and gave them their names. This is quite powerful if you think of it, because it's something that we don't look at, that we consider trash. And just the fact of giving them presence reevaluated what we think of them. And in that sense, I find that naming things for me is really one of the first steps to identity, to importance, to existence. If you know a lot of situations where people are being dehumanized, one of the first things that is being done is taking their names out. So naming things is always a first step to actually recognize and acknowledge the other. Another form of reevaluation is to repair, to consider that what is broken is actually meaningful and beautiful. This is, of course, a famous example of a kintsugi bowl, but it's also a form of repairing sorrows and repairing injustices, repairing things that were done to ourselves or to others, and we need a form of repair. This is another, so it's a little bit the inverted example. It's a series of work by Thierry Fournier, a photographer in France, who instead of adding information, remove information to highlight the pain. This was a demonstration where in France, where a lot of people were violated by the police. And instead of showcasing the violence there, they're just removing the policeman out of the picture. And it creates even more this highlight in the suffering of the person. Let me show you a quick example. I just quit to put it on. Can you see my screen with the TikTok or
Yes.
not?
Yes.
Okay. So I just
not
see
the TikTok.
not the TikTok.
You need to stop sharing and share again.
And share again. Okay. I just share a very quick. Just share a very quick TikTok video to show you also how you can use forms of representation in order to show your fight. So there it is. This is a Purple Ace TikToker.
Last but not least, I want to thank me. I want to thank me for believing in me. I want to thank me for doing all this hard work. I want to thank me for having no days off. I want to thank me for never quitting. I want to thank me for always being a giver and trying to give more than I receive. I want to thank me for trying to do more right than wrong. I want to thank me for just being me at all times. Last but not least.
So, let me reshare my keynote. Okay. Yeah, so she was presenting a sort of a makeup tutorial, but in the form of you can recognize the Black Lives Matter symbol on her eyes, and so that shows you how you can also divert some classic format into showing your own standpoint. And I'm gonna now finish with many examples. So I'm gonna go through them quickly of some of the works I've been doing with my students. This is in the Hacking Values class. This was students who really wanted to highlight, for instance, where we work at Zurich University of the Arts is a huge building. That we rely on a team of people, building services, janitors, people who are working in the background and literally in the backgrounds because we hardly ever see them. but they are the ones who are enabling us to do all this nice artistic and design work. So they did the work where they wanted to highlight, they shadowed the team of building services for 3 weeks, and they wanted to highlight what they did. So they created this sort of awareness campaign with t-shirts and stickers where they would say, do you see the work? This is a project that was done kind of reusing a space that was abandoned. It's kind of a space in the train station, and just by sort of reshaping, re-highlighting the value of the geometry of the space with a few light work, they were able to showcase the beauty of that space in a way. This was work that was done to reuse the pub. We don't, and with, I don't know how it is in Hong Kong. I don't remember seeing a lot of public phone stations. I know that in Zurich, there's still some few left, but they're very little used because everybody has mobile phone nowadays. But so this team of students wanted to re-highlight the potential of this kind of interesting public-private space in the middle of the city. Kind of a classic twist or a twist on a classic thing, which is dancing in the street. It was also during COVID, a lot of COVID restrictions. So people were, my students decided to create moments of silent disco where they would share a music platform across different people and invite people to join the dance party in a public space. This was a sort of a hammock. There was a series of hammocks set up in Tony Areal, our school, to also rehabilitate sleep as a valued tools as artists and human beings, and to offer this possibility and to say this is okay to sleep. This is works from the Embodied Interaction course. So it's a slightly different course. We don't necessarily have as much emphasis on political actions related to our environment or public space, but this is still a lot about this. It still share a lot of things with the notion of hacking values and how we interact with our environment. But the main focus here is to use the body, our own body, to be immersed in that. This was, and it's a kind of a funny follow-up to this one, because this is also a sleeping tool, but it's not a hammock. But it's this kind of mask that would tell that you would wear, or the idea is they're fully functional prototypes, but you would wear this mask and it would tell you when it's time to slow down and fall asleep during your day. This was a device that would showcase blood flows and oxygen flows within your own body. So showing the others how those elements are, so kind of highlighting also and sharing the vulnerability that we all have, sort of this kind of blood flow system. This was another tool that would be shared between two people, that you could share or empathize with pain levels between two people and sort of engage with one another through that. That's the tool that was designed. This one was kind of a notion of how cigarette smoking impacts our body, and this was made with cotton candy and with smoke, and sort of how we are chained to some form of addictions. This is a series that was specifically commenting the social credit system, where the less social credit you have, as a metaphor, the more you are squeezed into your own body. So here is 3 people, and the more you are popular, the more social credit you have, the more you're free of your movement. You can move your neck all the way around. Here it's a medium status, and here it's not at all. You're completely blocked and you cannot move. Here is a tool where they were trying to sort of use 3D printing techniques to generate like moments to sort of generate moments of adrenaline. So pushing air through tubes, cold air to kind of wake you up, and then release your stress after you had this cold air pushed into you. And this one is called The Animal Within. So it's kind of the last one I'm showing. And it goes back again to this sort of entanglement we have with others, and with also trying to realize how we are not far from our animal friends, in a way where here the more the person is pushed around or stressed out by the environment, the more the bodysuit inflates. So maybe you can also participate in the chat or ask questions, or maybe this kind of questions can be worked out in further exercise you have as you continue your ideation process, is to ask yourself whether you're a video editor or whether you are a filmmaker or a dancer or an industrial designer, is what do you actually value when you work? Is there anything that needs to change in your life or how you approach things? And is there any power structure you want to address? Like, is there any aspects of that entanglement? When you create artifacts, do you create more problems, or do you solve more some aspects, or do you think in the end it's a status quo? Do you create more injustices, or do you create more justice? Like, kind of trying to ask yourself those questions. Yeah, and if you have any questions, or if you want to contact me, you're welcome to email me and refer to those websites as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Joëlle. So the same, I think if you have any urgent question for clarification, you should raise your hand. But otherwise, I think because Andrea just informed me he prepared for 30 minutes, I think they're all very good friends of mine, and they all promised to have 30 minutes. So I think I will want to give him full time for him to really present his work. But just any like urgent question for Joëlle for clarification. Otherwise, we will just save to the end to like have more discussion. Anyone? 1, 2, 3. No. So I think let's Andreas present and share his work and ideas, and we will have a final discussion at the end. So save anything you want to talk to Joëlle, or put your question in the chat so we can have a look and then answer after Andrea's presentation. So Andrea, is your. Thank you, Joëlle, again.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Great. It's a great pleasure. Thank you, Yanki and Enable team and your students. It would be even better to join you on site, but I'm in Zurich now. About my person, I'm a lecturer at the Zurich University, and there I'm teaching about art and public space, about digitality, and about ecology. And the third topic is artificial intelligence. So my talk today is about a topic I'm very interested in, and I'm starting to work with my students in class. So I may share my presentation. Can you see it?
We can see, but you may need to change to full screen.
You can see it full screen.
We can see full screen, but we can also see all the topping. Oh, it's a PDF. You still need to be full screen. Yeah.
Wait a moment.
Yeah.
So is it better?
It's the same because I think it's a PDF, so you need to choose preview or.
I have preview chosen in my. Maybe try again. So my PDF is
yeah, now it's better. Yeah, it's all good.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the title of my presentation is Cohabitation in the sense of coexistence of humans and nature in urban contexts. The title refers to the exhibition Cohabitation in Berlin in 2021, and also to a related magazine Arc Plus, which is a great magazine, but unfortunately just in German. So this presentation points out ideas of cohabitation of man and nature in architecture, art, design, social context, and I also would like to show some future ideas at the end. But let's start with a philosophical thought. This is a photo I've taken in London some weeks ago. It's a traditional sculpture. It's the monument of George V. And this shows the traditional relationship between humans and nature in Western culture. And this relationship resembles to a pyramid. So if you have a look at this sculpture, you see, let's start on the bottom, you see the plinth. The plinth is very important because it means that everything on top is a symbol. Then we have the ground, the earth, we have the horse, which stands for the animals. And on top, we have the dominator, the king. It's a male rider. So Western society is very much based on Christianity, even if you are religious or not. So this is a very important sentence of Genesis, of the Bible, which is about maybe 3,000 years old. Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So if you see this sentence, it's quite radical. It puts the human on top. And just if you think about be fruitful and increase in numbers, maybe humans have taken it a bit too serious. So what could a holistic concept look like? A concept which is completely a different idea behind. So the idea of separation of man and nature is being replaced by a holistic understanding. What could a piece of art look like, which is illustrating these thoughts? So I have chosen this piece of Pierre Hugues. It's called Untitled, and was shown at the Documenta 10 years ago. So this piece of art is a sculpture too. It resembles to the Monument of Carl V. It's in public space, and it includes different elements, several elements. So this piece of art was quite difficult to find. It was in the hidden place in the park, and one main element was this copy of a traditional sculpture with a beehive instead of a head. This dog with this pink colored leg was part of the sculpture too. There have been lying around building materials. You didn't really get clear if it belongs to the piece of art or it was there before. There was an anthill, and it was also a compost with hallucinogenic plants. So this is a view on this sculpture. What is the meaning of this? So this sculpture has no clear boundaries. It's constantly changing. It remains unclear what was there before and what has been added. The artwork is fertile. It has an open frame of reference, and it involves animals and plants. So the basic structure is not a pyramid, it's a network. It's a demand to abandon the human-centered view of the world and adopt a more relaxed and respectful perspective. So if you compare these two pieces of art, this left one is a traditional one, man on top, and the right, the piece on the right is much more complex, it's much more open, and the man is part of a network which has not really a top-down orientation. There's happening a change without our invitation. Clear separation of humans, fauna, and flora no longer makes sense. The animal, plants, and viruses cross zones and circle the globe. Animals and plants adapt to new environments and migrate to the city. As an example, 2 years ago, I took pictures with a wildlife camera in the city of Zurich, and I was surprised how many foxes live in my neighborhood. This map points out where which animal has been spotted. In this area where I live, animals adapt to the city life and take part in city life. And very surprising, the urban biodiversity is greater than the biodiversity in the countryside. But more animals living in the city, more different animals living in the city now than the countryside. Let's have a look at some interesting examples from architecture. This is a building, Bosco Verticale, from Stefano Burri Architects in Milan. When I first saw this building a few years ago, the overgrowth was still sparse. I was skeptical whether it would succeed or not, but now it looks quite good. A new aspect that is the architect, the architect gives up control over the appearance of the building. So the building is changing with the seasons and the weather. Another example you probably have seen yourself is the Oasia Hotel downtown in Singapore. It's from Wuha Architects. I hope I spell it right, Wuha. There do many interesting projects in Singapore. Some of them are built, or some of them are in building or planned. If you go back in the past, Yanki showed me this area in London, the Barbican. It's from the 1970s. It's a residential complex with around 2,400 flats. In central London, a neighborhood was bombed out and rebuilt in the 70s. And the building includes communal spaces and many gardens and pools. A very impressive architecture. And if you go even further back, you can find many so-called garden cities built in the early 20th century. So each apartment has its own small garden. This is a cooperative with over 2,000 apartments where I live nearby in Zurich. Many other spectacular buildings are in corporate nature, are currently being built. I have collected some of them. You can find them, the links on the presentation I will share later. So greening in architecture has many interesting aspects. but one of the main is that it promotes biodiversity and introducing the cooling coast. So if you have a look at this image, you see that the green wall is about 20 degrees cooler than the wall without greening. It's quite impressive. Examples assume that we can keep our comfort level and continue to build high-rise buildings if we do better and incorporate nature into our concepts. But I'm not sure, is that enough? Or is it just greenwashing modern architecture, modern urbanism? The examples were about building in the traditional manner, but with greenery. It is still a disruptive approach that first tears down everything and then creates a high-rise. The following example goes a step further. This is a house called Bernenboek from the three architects De Walder, Think and Tailleux. It's in Belgium, in the center of Europe. So the example of the house Bernenboek shows a different philosophy of architecture. Careful attention is paid to the environment. The concept is not disruptive, but inclusive, and even includes a tree into the building. So the guiding principles of these architects could be the following: be modest, work with limited resources, integrate the environment, nature and existing buildings. If necessary, repair damaged structures in a simple way and create a new structure that overlaps with what is there already. You may think that this is rather an unknown architecture, but in fact, the three architects have become famous with these buildings, and now all three of them have a professorship at the universities. Let's have a look at other concepts in art, design, and social practice. This is a piece of Maria Castellanos. It's called Plant Sense. This interaction attempts communication between humans and plants to understand plant languages. The machine translates exactly the signals of the plants that we humans cannot receive in any other way due to our limited perceptual systems. So with this assets, she tries to get part of the communication of the language, of the signals of the plants. And I think she also shifting in the way of she's getting some kind of another look from human, a bit some kind of a special animal with these white applications. There are many other examples of art dealing with this topic. I provide you this link list. Now I point out two examples in the field of social practice. Maybe you know this. Some of you have already been in Berlin. So the historian Robert Shaw and the filmmaker Marco Clausen leased land in Berlin in 2009 and turned this wasteland into a paradise. They have been impressed by urban gardens in Havana, in Cuba. This corner is of Kreuzberg, Moisplatz near Cottbuser Tor, was precarious. 2/3 of the children were considered poor. During this time, you see the picture on the ground. I was living quite close to this area in Berlin, and it was really a no-go area. And then these two guys decided to make a special project. The Prinzessin Garden is an open space. It deals with the idea of how we want to live in the city in the long run and enjoy a sustainable life together by sharing, interacting, and learning from one another. Why gardening? Gardening creates a very special atmosphere to spend time together, independent on your cultural and social background. So these two guys haven't been interested in gardening. They just use it as a method to bring people together and to give them the opportunity to have another participation about sharing their with plants and nature. The design of the garden had to adapt to the given situation. The ground was contaminated. The raised beds were necessary because it was not possible to plant directly in the ground because of the contamination. And the lease of the courtyard was only short term, so they wanted to be able to move the whole garden. They also plant old and rare varieties, over 100 different varieties of herbs and vegetables. So it's like the mother of urban gardening, this Prinzessin Garden. Another example from Berlin. The so-called Mäusebunker, built in the 80s, served as a laboratory for animal testing. Then they left the building, and now the future is unclear. So this building has a very special architecture. It's a brutalism architecture. This is quite famous in Berlin, and it has a terrible past with this laboratory. At the moment, it's abandoned. There are some students' projects about the possible future. You see a simulation, how it could look like if nature immigrates the building. And the government of Berlin decided to make a prototype of a public discussion about the coexistence of humans with nature about this building. They have various interests about this future of this architecture. So there are the architects. So they discuss if the building should be preserved or demolished, or should it just be left to nature and become part of the ecosystem. There are the cohabitation topics. So how can we give it back to nature? How can we enable that animals and plants who has taken over already keep living together? And it's also a general topic. How should architecture look in cities that protects and cares for nature? And the third part is how can we see a city as a creative process? So what can we use what already exists? How can we rebuild it? And how can we continue building something when, for example, like at these examples, the function is changing? So this is a quite interesting process. So they didn't make a decision. They just made a platform where these different interests can be discussed as and used as a model for further city development. Finally, I would like to show you some fantastic projects. Some are dreams, others are realizable. This project points out a new architectural approach to human coexistence with nature. The architecture takes place inside the rotten trunks of giant sequoia trees. It's really a beautiful project, beautiful drawings. The idea is some kind of a dream. These sequoia trees are dying because it's getting too hot and too dry, and they're getting unstable, so they want to keep them, dead trees, make them stable again, and make apartments out of it. This is another example from Terraform research group. So they have the idea to grow trees and grow them in a way that you can, like building apartments within them. This is a concept of Studio Brecht. The basis is a farmhouse, and it's an urban house with included gardening and included agriculture. So you see they have a very modular construction idea. This is a different concept. Region villages, it's not really an architecture, it's more a software, more an app. It's using artificial intelligence to provide energy, clean water, and organic food. So if you see, it's a system driven by an artificial intelligence, which should enable to make a little village with self-sufficient living. You see a similar idea as Studio Brecht, so the inside of the buildings and mixed with areas. Then finally, I show two other projects of Terraform Research Group. This is a very beautiful idea, like a lot the butterfly project. So they planned to have a facade in New York City, which enables butterflies to stay there. The building will integrate monarch butterfly habitats into the facade. You see, they designed very special areas and structures and possibilities for plants to feed the butterflies. And I really would like to see them. Not sure if they realize it. It was planned to realize it, I think, 2 years ago. If you have a facade in New York where a lot of butterflies are flying around. And the last example from Terraform is this urban farm pod. It's a living cabin for urban individuals, so you can stay there inside, and the form of the cabin is also designed as a lot of habitats for greenery and animals. So you see how they go into these structures, which enables plants and animals to grow there. And then they have an inside a door where you can go inside and relax there. So this is this was the last example. These are free publications, which I think they're really very well made. So the one I talked about is the Cohabitation. Then we have this Kunstformen, which is the publication, quite a big publication about art and nature. And this Einfach Grün the City is a book about design and architecture, which gives very practical tips how you can green your building. So this is in German and in English. So let's start the discussion.
Thank you, Andreas. You only maybe 25 minutes. That was good. Okay. So thanks again, my really good collaborator and friends. So we have Nuria been sharing about a lot of artistic and I think it's more designery approach from Nuria, and then we have Joëlle, really looking at this of like radical critical perspective of why we're doing all this project, and then Andreas talking about this. Actually, I have been having this thinking about this being modest, being humble. So it's related to what we're talking about from this human ego to this tomorrow sustainability, coexist society. So I think there's a lot of thoughts and lots of I wrote down a lot of keywords for our interns, which is pretty new to this area, but maybe something quoting from Joëlle is something really everyday, how we can repairing our soil, greening the city. So it's something I think it can be very new for our interns, but at the same time, it's happening every day around us. So I just think I will open like so any question for Andreas. I think we need to just make it clear. Any clarification. I know it's speaking English. We today we find out there's a live transcript that we turn it on. So hopefully helping a bit. But I know our interns is very fresh and young, and this may be a bit overwhelming, but do try if you have any question that you don't understand or anything that they were talking about, or my colleague, which is like creative trainers, young designers, practitioners, do feel free. So anything for Andreas to start with. If no, we can move on to a more like wider discussion. Anyone? Good, because Andreas brings us another domain is more like architecture, because we have a lot of spatial design student here. So related to the city, and also all of them are working in the local area in Hong Kong, some shape or area. So I think this urbanness or this urban phenomenon is part of the project. And we can really see the spatial design student, like from interior design to landscape architecture, have more respond to the whole discussion, and while the others was just like really haven't really got to the scale of the city. So I thought this can be a very good discussion. Yeah, so anything this our student again, can you think this example can apply to video editing? As I say, yeah, it just depends on what you think about a skill. So maybe, do you want to say something about what do you think about video editing? Chen Waipok, do you want to say something here, or you are just want to ask a question? Because we already answered that in the last one.
Let me think.
Maybe you introduce yourself.
Not only editing, but something like effects, like something like effects in the video.
Effects in the video. So you mean anything to be, because I know a lot of artists use a video as a media. So how do you think we can maybe talk about a bit of maybe video, how this can be related to the work we are talking about? Because video have time, domain, and I think Andreas talked about a lot of architecture, spatial, related to the city, but how you guys see like video as a means to talk about all these issues, or any other questions? Or yeah, Nuria, try.
I saw Andreas also raising his hand. I have a question just for my understanding about the editing question. if you say effect, do you mean in which ways you can, or which kind of strategies, if there's different strategies that you can use in editing to have different effects or different ways of dealing with this, or just so I understand better what you mean? I mean, just in case, because in video, there's, I don't know if you mean how, or if there's different approaches that you can use in video besides a specific topic to deal with. I can imagine that, I mean, there is videos that Andreas showed some examples of night cameras watching foxes. So there's also cameras that try to emulate the perspective of a different species. Then, as in the tree lab, you can use data that you can use inside of editing in different ways, as for example, to create a rhythm inside of the images. Or so I think everything you learn from your observations, you can integrate into the editing itself, not only as a material, but maybe as a logic of how to work with it. So for example, if you record some, oh, sorry, I see here SFX. Can you specify? Sorry, my limited knowledge of SFX. Special effects. Okay, Andreas, maybe, yeah, Joëlle.
I think the way I think it would relate for me to special effects, I don't know if your answer is looking for more on a technical perspective, but let's say in terms of, I go back to the notion of values and the notion of critical ecologies. If you're using a special effect in your video editing that is maybe faking something, then is it the reality, or is it a fake reality, or do you try to repair, for instance, if you're filming or if you're doing a documentary on like the desertification of area, do you make it like it looks green? So do you lie? Or do you make it look green so that you say that that's what it would have looked like? So you can also question your values in overusing special effects, for instance, or using special effect to what effect? To the effect of emotion, to the effect of manipulation, to the effect of propaganda, to the effect of repair, to the effect of reinventing a world? Or do you use special effects for kind of recreating a reality that never existed? So that's the question for you. Like, how do you use the special effects? For what purpose?
Yeah,
So
Andrea.
I've got similar.
Thank you, Joëlle.
Similar topics. So I think we can just decide if you want to use video as a method to discover stuff, like, for example, time-lapse stuff, or you can use it in the way of as Joëlle mentioned, a piece of art. We have, if you are thinking about plants and animals, you have a lot of topics about getting in contact and not understanding what's going on. So you don't understand the barking of a dog, really. So maybe special effects could give us an idea how you personally would communicate or understand it. So this would be some kind of methodology for making art or making a suggestion how communication would work. Similar to this art piece I showed you with this special cloth of this women.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think, yeah, that is a very, I think you guys are very good teachers. So I really thanks for your effort, because they as we mentioned, our interns are very young, first year student from different disciplines. So everyone just really, at the moment, I see they're very focusing on their skill learning. So this is something maybe quite far away what they are learning. So yeah, it's good. Thanks for so much to try to bridge this. I think it's been very useful. So just wondering, any of my creative trainers have any thoughts about all these new topics? Anyone? While they were thinking, maybe I have just quick questions. We've been working together, Nuria was saying, for 5 years, and how you guys see this subtopic been changing since we start this conversation? I think, I remember when we're talking about, when we designed the name in Hong Kong, we call critical ecology, and then no, critical ecologies. So I think we already predict that will be a lot of options, lots of variety, will be a lot of layers happening because it's complex. How you guys see, especially you've been, like Nuria been teaching in Hong Kong and then working with like in Europe, and or Joëlle is working in Zurich and also from different discipline, and Andreas with more like teachers. How you guys see this in this 5 years time? How your experience been changed in this multipolarity of this topic? How you think? And also what do you think in the future? Because to be very honest, Hong Kong is a very trendy, you all know that it's a very trend city. Something can be stay for some very short time and then move on. And how you think this, from your experience coming to Hong Kong and in Asia, how you guys feel this topic can be stay on this stuff, critical mindset or even radical, or it's just another topic mainstream and then die out? What do you guys feel? Oop, they're frozen. Nuria first, maybe Nuria. Yeah. So.
Thanks. Well, I have an observation. When we started, about 5 years ago, we in the group felt a very strong urgency to act, and we felt that it was incredible that not everyone was already doing something, and for sure there were many people already since ages working in the field. But still, in the last 5 years, I've been always researching and watching a little bit around. I could see how internationally more and more master studies were coming up working on arts and ecology. So also in the educational systems, the need to do something, to learn, to become sensitive to the topic, to become knowledgeable, and to create different reactions, forms of reacting, and as Joëlle said, also reflecting values and how we can become part of an acting, creative community, has become more than evident. So we see that it doesn't matter where you look at, the topics have been raised, are becoming part of the education system. And so I think that clearly changed. I think also in the general media, we can at least here in Europe, we can, you open the news and you see so many information about, for example, now the water levels lowering in all of different rivers and lakes all over Europe. There's a strong water luggage here in Spain and Greece. I mean, there's really no water. People have to, they cannot use water after a certain time of the day. And so we cannot forget, or we cannot see that these things are really happening. Now also with this crisis of energy and stuff happening in Europe, we also see that we have to rethink how we use the energy and all the materials that are around us. So we are forced into this. So I think there's both levels interacting, and I as mentioned at the beginning, we all discussed that in the creative arts, as also questions were raised before, all the skills, it doesn't matter if you work with space, with sound, with video, with artificial intelligence, we all can use our skills in order to question, to explore, and to be actively part of a change of imagining a different way of coexisting. Yeah, so that's an observation that I clearly did in the last years.
Yeah, Andrea.
I'm following Nuria, but maybe something which didn't really change is, I mean, you are all youngs, which are coming to the art school or design faculty. And I think this age, it was the same for me. You really want to be an author, you want to do design, and you need this authorship. So this is really great, but maybe it changed in the last years a bit that in my students, before it was more the target to be established on the art market. And now the focus is a bit more on how can you improve society, how can you improve, what do you say, more about the social thinking or the environmental thinking. This made a shift that was in my perception the last 3 years.
I can follow up on that as well. I mean, there are a few things that changed. The one thing with the students is that I feel that there are a lot of things I was talking about at the beginning that that they might not know of, such as terms like intersection, queer, you know, sort of changing also this notion of having different perspective or awareness of social issues like Black Lives Matter, or generally like being much more concerned with diversity, LGBTQI and so on. And those things have definitely changed. Like now when I speak to students, this is even more kind of embraced. Also question of entanglement between environment and political aspects. This is no longer so separated. People understand that. I feel like there's a better understanding of correlating like industrial pollution, political entanglement, critical ecologies. It's no longer just, I hear at the beginning, I was advocating a lot for putting systemic change in the heart of things and not individual change. And I think now people talk about much more systemic, not putting the responsibility on individuals, but putting the responsibilities on industries. So that for me changed. And I think just in terms of practices and design and also amongst the group, I feel like we got a little bit more radical with, or less ambivalent with trying to make compromises, or trying to just be more upfront, more straightforward, more sure of our position in a way, and much less tolerant for BS, if I can say like this, like a little bit more, you know, let's get to the point, let's go towards action. Yeah. So that's for me changed quite a bit.
Yeah, Andrea.
The situation, as I understand right, is now that you the students are now just changing from the files they started developing their own projects.
Yeah.
And it's maybe also a thing I see with my students, that all this stuff we have been talking about this morning is quite complicated.
Yes.
It's a lot of things thinking at the same time. So the danger is a bit to feel some kind of helpless, getting lost.
Yeah.
So my students have sometimes the strategy to really go into a very small topic, to do, for example, do some kind of working with the hands to a very to reduce the complexity. I think this is quite a good strategy. So just maybe just don't think anymore, just doing try to do something. Maybe you can take material from the surrounding area. And I think this is a tragedy, how to deal with complexity. How can you act now? So what is the way of acting and producing something?
Yeah. This is so because every Monday we have this pattern of briefing and always come back with like 1,000 of questions and question marks, and they were very confused. But every week, I think we did really well last week, is the minutes that everyone just go and make their own little objects that represent their work and then put into this big map. Everyone was so engaged, and we're very, very engaged and very happy about this. I think this is why we were trying to show them this, also encouraging, like Andreas just say, is I think one of the good thing about designer is we are makers. We can really making things that which is always different from the others. And so the minute we start to make things, I think everyone's starting to realize how amazing the collective is working together. So yeah, that's a really good advice. But because we also want them to have this thinking to back up what they've been doing. That's why we have you guys and also different people giving talk, and also we also give them a lot of examples to widen up their thinking. But at the same time, I think they need to really making something small and then try to drive some meaning from the making and also the reference or examples people are sharing. So I think we are almost come up to the end, or yeah, I think because I know you guys, Nuria is in holiday and Zurich is just starting of the day. So but thank you so much. I will bring back the results when we met, maybe possibly in September, and hopefully we can have more involvement from you guys next year, because the funding, as I think this project I've been talking for 3 years, so finally got is up and running, but it's a 2 cycle, so we are testing the pilot 1. This is the year 1, so hopefully next year we can have more interaction with you guys and see how not just the talk, but maybe also with today's conversation to see what will be the next step. I think the coexistence is really important, which is, I think, we're definitely bringing a new perspective in Hong Kong, because the people are still talking about waste management, which is the waste management, clean air, which is the end of the process. I think what we talk about coexisting multi-species is the beginning of the process. And then because we starting from the beginning, we will have much more possibility of difference, just not looking at the solution, but actually looking at questions, possibility, experiments. And I think this is what Hong Kong really needs. And this is why we are very glad that the Jockey Cups really see the potential of the project. So hopefully we can share a bit more later on the results, and then maybe we can look at the process again together. Anyone want to say more things? Or we just have too much thing on? But thank you so much, my friend in Europe, and enjoy your Monday.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Summer school, enjoy.
Yeah, enjoy.
Bye.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.